Hey everyone, and welcome to WDIM News, my weekly podcast where I talk about sci-fi stuff and some other stuff. My name is Eric. Thank you very much for joining me. Today I will start off by discussing the second episode of the second season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, by not only reviewing it, but also breaking it down and discussing all the Easter eggs and references that I could find. Then I want to talk about the somewhat surprising news that another Star Trek series has been canceled after being picked up for a new season years ago that has mostly been completed. I also want to discuss the latest dive into science fiction for the MCU, or the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which would be the new series Secret Invasion, and give you my thoughts on the first episode that has been released. Then I will end with some other news in or around Hollywood from this past week, including a new trailer that looks insane and an update on the writer's strike. But first, I want to thank you for clicking on this video and ask that you hit that like button right now to help support the work that I do. Also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the bell so that YouTube will let you know when my new videos come out. All right, so first let's talk about the second episode of the second season of Strange New Worlds, titled Ad Astra per Aspera. I thought that this was a good episode. I know that I've heard some very positive reviews of this episode. I don't know if I'm as on board as other reviewers, and I'll explain why as I go through it. But all in all, I did think it was a good episode, and it reminds the audience of other great Star Trek courtroom episodes. The first one that always comes to my mind is Measure of a Man. It's another really good courtroom episode, and it has to do with Data being put on trial by Starfleet, basically to determine what his rights are as an individual, if he is just a thing or if he is a being. And Picard actually has to face off against Riker in the episode, and Riker does a good job just because, you know, he is an officer and he has to follow his duty. But it's a really good episode, and it does what Star Trek is really good at, is it puts the issues of the real world in a different lens, and it kind of lets you see things in a different way. And because of that, like I said, I think it's a good episode of Star Trek, and it definitely reminded me of Measure of a Man. So like that episode, this episode deals with Una Chin Riley and the aftermath of the season finale of Star Trek Strange New Worlds first season, in which Starfleet found out that Una Chin Riley was an Illyrian, which is a species that is genetically modified. Being genetically modified is a no-no as a Starfleet officer. This also means that she lied on her Starfleet application, and this is a big point that I want to touch on later, because I think it kind of gets lost in the resolution. But we find out that she is being put on trial, and so we learn in the beginning of the episode that there is a really powerful lawyer that is also an Illyrian, and Captain Pike goes to find her and almost dies doing so because he can't handle the atmosphere. And she eventually agrees to help Captain Pike and to defend Una. And we find out that they're also friends and that Una did something to her way back when. We don't know how long ago it was, at least 25 years ago, because we learned that Una's been in Starfleet for 25 years. There's an Easter egg that you might not have caught. So this lawyer comes, and it seems like she's on Una's side, but she's not on Una's side. She definitely has feelings about her and this case and the rights of Illyrians in Starfleet, and she doesn't feel it's right how Starfleet looks at Illyrians. But through the course of the episode, she finds out by coming clean to Christopher Pike, her captain, she was essentially asking for asylum from Starfleet, but it was Starfleet who was persecuting her, so that's kind of a loophole too. So in the end, it's determined that Una can stay as a member of Starfleet and a member of the Enterprise crew. She doesn't have to be dishonorably discharged, but because of the way that the resolution came about, it doesn't change anything in Starfleet. It doesn't change their rules about Illyrians. It just gets Una and Captain Pike off the hook. So, like I said, good episode. It was a great episode for Rebecca Romijn. I think she really seems to understand her character. If you've seen her in other things, she's usually way more like boisterous, and she shows way more personality. And in this role, it seems like Rebecca Romijn is really like kind of reserved and like holding in a lot of stuff. And she's doing a lot just like with her face and just with a little stuff that she's doing. And I like that. I think it's really a showcase for her as an actress. The only thing I really know her from is the X-Men franchise. And that was definitely a very, very different part for her. So it's good to see her, show her acting chops off. And I really like her as number one, Una Chin Riley. I think that was a great casting choice. And I think she really plays off Anson Mount as Captain Pike very well. Both of these actors are obviously very attractive, Rebecca Romijn and Anson Mount, but you never feel like any sexual tension between them. I think that's really, really cool. usually when you have a male and female counterpart in these kind of situations, you feel some kind of tension, even if it was just a little bit or they don't really talk about it, something like that. I mean, I'm not talking necessarily about Janeway and Chakotay, but in a lot of instances, it is like Janeway and Chakotay, where you could tell that these two people really do feel like strong feelings for each other, but they just can't act on them because of their, rank and their duty. But you don't feel that. And I don't think it takes away from their relationship at all. You really feel like number one and Captain Pike have a special respect for each other and has nothing to do with romantic feelings. And like I said, it's not because these two are ugly, because both of these actors, are very attractive, obviously. And if they got together, they'd make some kind of super baby, probably. But I think that's a really good part of their dynamic, that there is no sexual tension. And you can tell that even without that, they have this really strong bond, and I love that at the end, Pike gives her this really awkward hug. And I mean, Pike has always been shown to be real suave. So you expect him to go in for like a real, like cool, like bear hug and stuff, and a real meaningful hug. But that wouldn't fit for these two characters, right? It makes more sense for them to kind of display their affection like that. I also think it was a standout guest star performance by Yetide Badaki as Nira. I hope I didn't butcher her name too bad. She is a fantastic actress. She was also in the series American Gods. I know that in many of her roles in the past, she's played like, a very strong character like this, and she really came off as the character. I bought her as a Law and Order style, lawyer on a courtroom TV show. It didn't even have to be Star Trek. There are parts in this episode where you can forget this is a Star Trek episode. I mean, obviously they're talking about like aliens' rights and stuff like genetically modified individuals, stuff like that. But I do think that, she really brings something to this performance. And that's what you want from a guest star, from somebody that I'm pretty sure is only going to appear in one episode. I know that the reaction to her as this character has been pretty positive, so maybe they'll bring her back. She obviously has some kind of relationship with number one, which maybe they can now go back to because maybe some fences have been mended after this episode. But I really thought that she did a great job. Star Trek has done a fantastic job in casting recently, with not only their main cast, but their supporting actors. In this past season of Picard, we were introduced to Todd Stashwick as Captain Shaw and Amanda Plummer as Vadic, and they both just blew the doors off the house. I mean, they were both awesome guest stars, and, we're following suit here with Strange New Worlds. I also thought that this episode proved that Star Trek Strange New Worlds can pull off yet another type of episode. I know that I've talked about this before in my reviews of Strange New Worlds episodes and why I like the series, because the series has proven time and time again in really only 12 episodes that they can do, this kind of episode, and they can do a funny episode, and they can do a horror episode, and they can do, they can do just about every kind of episode that we have seen in Star Trek's history. And that is not easy to pull off. I don't know if you could say that Lower Decks or that even Picard could have pulled off as many types of episodes that Strange New Worlds can. It shows that Strange New Worlds isn't just in one kind of box. It can do a lot of different things. And when you're plotting out a 10-episode season, that's important, because you don't want, a courtroom episode and then another courtroom episode, or a politics episode and then another politics episode. You want really a mixed bag throughout those 10 episodes. And Strange New Worlds has shown that it could really do that. And speaking of political issues, I think that this obviously is another example of how Star Trek does tackle current socio-political issues and fit them into a sci-fi narrative. I think that Star Trek exposes people to ideas and maybe perspectives and points of view that they might not get in their normal life, their normal everyday life, where just because of, the part of the country they live in, or what country they live in, or their culture, or, where they work, or who they're exposed to. And a lot of times I use the word insidious, and I don't like to use the word insidious because it has a negative connotation, but it is kind of insidious the way that Star Trek gets you to think about things in a new way. And I don't mean that Star Trek tries to brainwash you and change your opinions. What I mean is that it kind of sneaks up on you, and you'll be watching a sci-fi show, and all of a sudden they're talking about things that are actually going on in the real world that you may have seen on the news and really don't have any experience with. And then within this framework, you can kind of be like, oh, like I get that. I think that that's great that Star Trek is able to do that. It's not always successful. I mean, Star Trek has had plenty of on the nose episodes where they're just, beating an issue to death. But most times I'd say they get it right. And I think in this episode they did. When you get into the episode, you know kind of what you're in store for. This is a story about rights. This is a story about, Una being on trial because of who she is. But I think it does make you think more than you thought you would think, if that makes any sense, going into the episode. And I think that's really great. That's another great thing that Star Trek does. Now, there's a couple of things that I wasn't a big fan of in this episode. And the first thing is that the resolution really doesn't make any sense when you think about it. So the way that Una kind of gets off on this, and the reason that she can stay on the Enterprise, is that when Una talked to Captain Pike and told him that she was an Illyrian, that she was basically seeking asylum, and that Starfleet also has a directive that they're supposed to honor that when somebody says that they're in fear of their life because they're being prosecuted for who they are, that they can seek asylum with Starfleet. And when that occurs, the officer that they're presented with this kind of gets to make their own decision on it. And because of this, Captain Pike is off the hook for not telling anybody that he knew that Una was an Illyrian. And Una is also off the hook because since she's been given asylum, they cannot prosecute her because of that. So that resolution does not make sense because the thing that Una was on trial for was she filled out paperwork that said she was not an Illyrian. This resolution does not solve that because Una sought asylum after that event. So if anything, what should have happened was the deal that Una was offered, that's what she should have got. She should have been removed from Starfleet because she lied on the form, but she didn't deserve to be in prison because she should be able to seek asylum and be a Federation citizen. That would have made more sense, I think. But the fact that she got off scot-free, I mean, you could tell that the people that were prosecuting her were looking for an out. As the trial went on more and more, you could tell they wanted to prosecute her less and less. But still, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me or hold any water to say that, well, after she was already serving in Starfleet for many, many, many years and promoted all kinds of people and done all kinds of things and been involved in all these situations, she then told her captain that she was an Illyrian, and she also told Starfleet that she was an Illyrian. That doesn't change the fact that she lied on her paperwork. So I may just be nitpicking here, and let me know in the comments, do you think that I'm just crazy and I'm being too nitpicky here? But I think another thing that is my problem with this resolution is that I thought that what was going to happen with Una was that she was going to be recruited by Section 31, because in the Deep Space Nine episode, Dr. Bashir, I presume, when it is learned that Dr. Bashir is a genetically modified individual, he kind of gets to stay in Starfleet because of a technicality, but he is then recruited into Section 31, and it's kind of inferred that the reason that he's in Starfleet still is because they want him for Section 31. I thought the same thing was going to happen with Una here. That makes more sense to me because not only is there precedent, but it totally makes sense that they would want a genetically modified individual in Section 31 during this time, and they wouldn't want to just lose her experience. And if they could keep her, they would use this. So I think it may be a situation where, like, the resolution in my head I like more. So that's why I'm like, oh, why didn't they do that? Like, this is kind of dumb the way they did it, because I mean, it kind of seems clever, but it is also very convenient, and it really doesn't hold water, like I said, because if you're saying that, okay, she sought asylum and she can't be prosecuted for that, well, that doesn't change the fact that years and years and years before that, she lied on her entry paperwork to Starfleet, which should disqualify her from being able to serve in Starfleet. It shouldn't put her in prison, but it should disqualify her from serving in Starfleet. So that's just my 2 cents on it. And that really took me out of the episode. Like, I was really into the episode before that. And then when they got to that and the asylum kind of thing, I was like, what? That doesn't make sense. That you're putting the cart before the horse. You know, the thing already happened before she sought asylum. So I don't know. I'm not going to press on it anymore. But for me, that kind of took me out of the episode. And then another thing, and I guess this isn't really a knock on the episode itself, but it was just a bummer for me when I thought about it, was that even though this happened in this episode, nothing changes in Starfleet because, as I mentioned in the episode, Dr. Bashir, I presume Dr. Bashir has found out that he was genetically modified and he didn't even know, like, he didn't have a choice about it. It was done to him when he was a kid and he found out about it later on. He was put through the ringer. So it's obvious that nothing was changed. And there's another episode of DS9 called Statistical Probabilities, easy for me to say, where we learn that there are even other genetically modified individuals that are in Starfleet, but that are like savants, and they're not technically serving in Starfleet, but they do help them in certain ways, and it's kind of weird. And Dr. Bashir tries to help them and stuff. It's really interesting. Maybe this is another way, actually, that Star Trek is showing us a mirror of what happens in our real lives, because it does seem like a news story will be really big in like a news cycle, but then nothing will happen. So like, you know, something will happen in the news and everybody will be talking about it and it'll be like, oh, we got to change this, we got to do that. And then something else will happen that'll be different and they'll move on to the next thing and nothing will really change. And that seems to be exactly what happened here with Illyrians and the rights of genetically modified individuals. So that kind of bummed me out when I kind of came to that realization. But again, that might be another way that Star Trek is a prism and showing us what is going on in real life. But so all in all, a good episode. I would say a 4 out of 5. Probably not the best episode in the world. If the resolution would have landed, I think it would have been one of the best episodes of Strange New Worlds and possibly even Star Trek, especially when you talk about the courtroom. Because I was thinking about how this was so much like Measure of a Man. And like while the episode was going on, I was like, is this going to be better? Is this going to top it? What's going to happen? And then when they came up with the resolution, I was like, nope, it is not. It is not better than Measure of a Man, but that's okay. That doesn't mean it, you know, not everything has to be a perfect 10. So this one, like I said, was more like an 8 out of 10 or maybe an 8.5. But let me know in the comments, what did you think about this episode? And am I crazy for not thinking the resolution was good? Do you think that the resolution does make sense and that I'm just being too nitpicky? Let me know in the comments below. All right, so now let's go into the Easter eggs that I found in this episode. Now, you may be wondering why I did not release a separate Easter egg video this week like I usually have done in the past. The answer to that was actually in my podcast for last week. I talked about some problems I've been having with YouTube and Paramount in particular when releasing these videos and how I have trouble getting them monetized. So because of that, I'm not going to be able to do my breakdown videos in the same format that I have been doing. I'm going to be doing them like this, incorporating them into my reviews and my podcast. I have been toying with the idea of separating my review from the podcast, maybe releasing the reviews on Friday or Saturday, as these podcasts come out on Monday and possibly not as many people care about the episode going into next week. But let me know if you have a theory on that in the comments or if you have any opinion on that in the comments. But for now, I'm just going to keep the Easter eggs with the reviews during my podcasts on Monday. So this episode actually didn't have a ton of Easter eggs, so this was a perfect time for me to start incorporating this stuff into my review, because I don't know if I can make an 8-minute YouTube video out of the Easter eggs, at least I could find. So first of all, the episode title, Ad Astra per Aspera, is the 17th Star Trek episode to use Latin in its title, the first being Sub Rosa from The Next Generation. So this is actually a tradition that is post the original series. This started in The Next Generation. And this is also the second Strange New Worlds episode that has used Latin in the title, the first being Memento Mori. When Spock is on the stand, he references his first day on the Enterprise. This was actually shown in a short Trek episode titled Q&A that was basically just Spock and Number One on a turbolift. I really hope they do more short treks. I don't know why they stopped doing it. That was such a good idea. I've lamented week after week about how Star Trek needs an anthology series, and that's what should be called Star Trek Legacy. But I digress. But anyway, if you want to see a good short Trek episode, Q&A is a pretty good one. Like I said, it's just them two in a turbolift. Number One's fondness for Gilbert and Sullivan is something the character shares with the actress who plays her. So in the episode Q&A, Number One actually sang part of a Gilbert and Sullivan song, and I think it was revealed in the ready room of that short Trek that this was actually something that Rebecca Romaine does in her real life, that she's a huge fan of this pair and that she knows a whole bunch of their songs. So that's why she was able to sing that song so easily in that episode. It is also revealed in this episode of Strange New Worlds that 2 months have passed since Una was arrested which is the end of season 1. So very short time period has passed since the end of season 1, which I thought was pretty cool. I did say last week incorrectly that the second season of Strange New Worlds filmed back to back with the first season. I was confusing this with the second and third seasons of Picard. So that is true for Picard, but not true for the second and first season of Strange New Worlds. Those were filmed about a year apart. So this season was filmed in 2022. The trial for Una took place at Starfleet Command, which is in San Francisco, California, in the United States. Since the original series, I believe the episode was titled Court Martial, it has been established that both Starfleet Command and Starfleet Academy are in San Francisco, and that stays true up until like the 30th century when we get into Star Trek Discovery. Captain Battelle reminds Pike that he can be punished for the actions of his crew. This was something that General Chang also reminded Captain Kirk of in the film Star Trek The Undiscovered Country in that courtroom scene. The ringing bell at the beginning of the hearing and the red light under the witness's hand are also both from the original series episode Court Martial. General Order 1 is now called the Prime Directive. So if you notice in Star Trek Discovery, they didn't talk about the Prime Directive. It was known as General Order 1. And now it looks like General Order 1 is now called the Prime Directive because they directly reference it in this episode. And it looks like it was during this time that it was when it was established. Ad Astra per Aspera was the motto of United Earth Starfleet. That is the Starfleet that preceded the current version of Starfleet that is aligned with the Federation. So if you watch Star Trek Enterprise, the show that had Scott Bakula as Jonathan Archer, that was United Earth Starfleet. They were in the process of establishing the Federation. In the last episode, they show a conference where that was where I think the first charter was established for the Federation. But before that, it was known as United Earth Starfleet. Why that's important is this is also where Section 31 comes from. So in the original charter for United Earth Starfleet, in Article 14, Section 31, the charter made allowances for certain rules to be bent during times of an extraordinary threat. So you could say that Section 31 has never been aligned with the Federation. They're always tied to Starfleet because they were created before the Federation when Starfleet was just aligned with United Earth. And I think the United Earth flag is also shown in this episode. That kind of makes sense because we're only, I think, about 100 years since the events of United Earth and the beginning of the Federation. So it would make sense that now we would still see those flags, but probably years and 100 years and 100 years in the future, we won't because nobody really thinks about United Earth anymore. And finally, actress Yetide Badaki is a longtime Star Trek fan and did an interview with the channel Sci-Fi over 5 years ago where she discussed how Star Trek shaped her view of what was possible in her life while she was a child. She spoke specifically about how she loved Captain Picard's long speeches about how humanity has evolved over time, which I thought was really cool because she is possibly referring to the episode Measure of a Man, which this episode of Strange New Worlds is very much like. So it's kind of crazy that she was talking about these, monologues of Captain Picard about humanity. She had to be talking about Measure of a Man. And then years later, she's cast on Star Trek in a courtroom episode where she's doing the same thing. So I thought that was kind of weird. Like that kind of got the hair on the back of my neck stand up a little bit, like how the universe works sometimes. So I thought that was pretty cool. But let me know if I missed any Easter eggs. Again, I didn't see too many in this episode. And again, what did you think of this episode as a whole? So now let's talk about Star Trek Prodigy and how this week it was surprisingly revealed that the series has been canceled. Not just canceled, but that the studio Paramount reversed its decision on a season 2 pickup. And that second season is already in post-production. So this story comes from the Hollywood Reporter, and they state that the Paramount Global back streamer has canceled Grease Rise of the Pink Ladies after a single season and reversed its decision on a season 2 pickup for the animated and kids-focused Star Trek Prodigy. Additionally, all these shows will be removed from Paramount Plus as the conglomerate joins Disney and Warner Brothers Discovery in taking tax write-offs for underperforming series. So it's obvious that Star Trek Prodigy has not been the hit that Paramount has tried to convince us that it is. I think that the first season is a really weird first season because not only is it 20 episodes, but it's 10 episodes that are spread out a year apart. So they released the first 10 episodes and then they waited a year to release the next 10. That is super weird. And I think that there is a definite shift in tone between the first 10 and the back 10. I don't think that the show knew what kind of show it was. I think at the beginning, the producers of the show wanted to be very, very kid focused, like laser focused on getting kids interested in Star Trek. And it just wasn't working because I thought the episodes were really silly. And I don't know that kids were even tuned in to watch this because I don't think kids care about Star Trek like this. I mean, I have an 11-year-old and a 5-year-old, and they could care less about what I do. I mean, they don't know anything about Star Trek, no matter how much I try and show them. They know about Baby Yoda, but they don't know. They don't know anything about Star Wars besides Baby Yoda. But they really don't know anything about Star Trek. And I think Star Trek was kind of trying to create their own Baby Yoda with Prodigy somehow, and it just didn't work. And then the second part of the first season of Prodigy, it seems to be now they shifted to getting more Star Trek fans interested in the show. Like there's way more references and way more characters show up from Star Trek's past in the second half of the first season than does in the first half. And I think that that's by design. I think that they realized after that first 10 episodes that they were not getting the draw from kids that they expected or that they were trying to get. And they were like, well, the only way we're going to save this is to get diehard Star Trek fans to watch it. A lot of Star Trek fans see everything as a unicorn. Anything that has a Star Trek tag on it, they will like and they will watch and they will support. And that's fine. I'm not casting aspersions. But as a reviewer, as someone who can be a conscientious objector, I can say that this is not a good show. It's very muddled in terms of tone and, who the show is made for. I've stated that I was surprised that it got a season 2 pickup and that I was not surprised when it didn't get a season 3 pickup when the other renewals were announced just a few months ago. But I am surprised that they decided to kill it at this point because that second season is already mostly done. So the story behind that is that Star Trek Prodigy was renewed for a season 2 in November of 2021 and was a key push by franchise captain Alex Kurtzman to introduce the property to a younger generation. The series will complete post-production on season 2 of Prodigy, and producers CBS Studios will shop both seasons to a new buyer. So this means that they are going to complete season 2 because they've already done a ton of work on it, and they're going to try and sell it to like Netflix or Roku or some other streaming service that will buy it and show it on their networks. This also means that the first season of Star Trek Prodigy will be removed and may be removed by the time this podcast is released. I do think that having a new season almost complete makes this property more attractive for another buyer because you have possibly 20 episodes of new content that you can use, or maybe you can go back and say, I want to change a couple things or something like that. But you have a lot of new content and you have 20 episodes of established content. And this is Star Trek, so people are going to watch it because it's Star Trek. So I think that this makes Star Trek Prodigy more attractive to a potential buyer. And like I said, maybe we'll see it on Amazon or Netflix in the near future. But I think that if the show ever gets a season 3, it just needs to find its center. It needs to figure out who the show is for. Are you trying to get, teens or preteens to like Star Trek? Are you trying to do cool things in animation with Star Trek? Because Star Trek Prodigy was a beautiful show. I'm not going to take anything away from the way Star Trek Prodigy looks on screen. I think that everything from the intro to the way the characters are drawn and the alien planets, it's a beautiful show. So there are good parts already with Prodigy. You've got Kate Mulgrew. You've got a couple other people from Star Trek's past attached to this project. You've got a pretty decent voice cast. I did like Riley Elizraki as Rok-Tahk, and I liked Gwyn. I thought that Gwyn was a very interesting character, and I thought that Rok-Tahk was a very interesting character. But I can't remember the blue guy. I must have blocked it out because I really don't like that character. Yeah, I just think the show needs to find its center if it's going to get a third season. It needs to figure out, is this going to be a beautiful show that adults that like Star Trek can watch and can maybe see some things in animation that you wouldn't be able to see on screen because it's too expensive or maybe not even possible? Or are you going to go back to trying to get this to be for kids and maybe even release it on a more kid-friendly streaming service like Caboodle or something. Like, if you're gonna go for kids, like just go all in and go for kids, because I think that just like walking the line doesn't really cut it for me. And I think that in the future, in the near future, Paramount will use its new series Star Trek Starfleet Academy to attract younger audience. I think by Paramount walking away from Prodigy, it doesn't mean they're walking away from garnering a younger audience. It just means that they're kind of cutting ties with something that's not working. And they had this new idea, Starfleet Academy, that they think will work and will bring in younger audiences. And they're just going to say, you know, we're walking away from this table and we're placing our bets at this table now. And that's how it's going to be going forward. But, you know, let me know, what do you think of this news? Do you think that Star Trek Prodigy does have a future? Did you like that show? I know from the comments that I've gotten in the past, not a lot of people that watch my channel like Star Trek Prodigy. But if you're the exception, let me know. I mean, if you want to support this series, leaving comments on YouTube videos is a great way to do it, because the studios do look at that. So, you know, let me know in the comments, what do you think of Star Trek Prodigy? And are you surprised that it's not only canceled, but that Paramount Plus won't even be showing the second season on its streaming service, even though it's already almost done? Let me know if you think that's crazy in the comments below. All right, so now that we've talked about Star Trek, here's a few other things that I think are interesting in the world of sci-fi. And the one thing that I want to talk about is the first episode for Secret Invasion. Now, if you're not aware of what this show is, this series is on Disney Plus, and it's a part of the MCU, so the big Marvel Cinematic Universe. But I will say that this is definitely a series that you do not have to watch a ton of the MCU or be familiar with it to understand what's going on. Really, I think you only need to watch one movie, and that's Captain Marvel. So if you've seen Captain Marvel with Brie Larson, I think that's really the only thing you need to watch before you watch Secret Invasion. But for someone who is not familiar with the MCU and has no idea what Secret Invasion is, it's kind of like Invasion of the Body Snatchers meets a Tom Clancy spy thriller. So it has to do with a alien race known as the Skrulls invading Earth, and there are good Skrulls and there are bad Skrulls, but all Skrulls are shapeshifters, so they can mimic somebody's appearance down to their clothes, down to everything, and they can even kind of like tap into their mind. Like, they can put their hand on you and like learn everything about you up to that point, basically, and really just replace you. And that's what they're kind of doing. The good Skrulls and the bad Skrulls are replacing people around the Earth. And now Nick Fury, played by Samuel L. Jackson, is trying to stop it. And of course, he can't trust anybody because anybody could be a shapeshifter. His character has even shown to be a shapeshifter in a prior movie. But again, that was good. That was one of the good ones. So we're okay with that. But it can be kind of confusing because not only is there shapeshifting, but there's good ones and there's bad ones. The first episode was released, and a couple of interesting things, big things do happen in the first episode. So this series is only 6 episodes. So you can kind of expect that, I think, that not only will you not have to invest, you know, a lot into this to watch it. There's only going to be 6-hour-long episodes, but I think it's going to move very fast. And like I said, there's a couple of big things that happened in the first episode. I'm not going to spoil it in case you haven't watched it yet, but it does get moving fast. And there are some really good performances. Ben Mendelsohn, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He's in this and he's really good. Samuel L. Jackson is really good. And there's a couple of other actors that have been added to this series. Olivia Colman and Emilia Clarke from Game of Thrones are two that are already shown to be big characters in this story. Secret Invasion is a huge story from the comic books. And I think it's so big and so important that it's pretty much impossible for this series to live up to. So I don't think they're trying to do it at all, which I think is actually smart. Sometimes the MCU swings big on some of these comic book storylines and they do not hit the mark. Age of Ultron is one that I think that most fans really talk about as being an all right movie, but compared to the comic book storyline, it's nothing in the same scope. And I think that Secret Invasion is going to be very much like that. I think that it will lead to things and it will, you know, change things in the MCU, but I don't think that it's going to be as big for the MCU as it was for the comic book universe. So again, I don't think you have to be totally invested in comic books. You don't have to be totally invested in the MCU to like this series. And the fact that it's only 6 episodes, in 6 weeks it'll be done and you can move on to something else. So, if you're looking for something to watch, I know there are a lot of things coming out right now. I just talked about Black Mirror last week, and that's definitely something sci-fi that you should watch if you have Netflix. But Secret Invasion, if you have Disney Plus, and I know there's not a lot on Disney Plus to watch, Secret Invasion is something I think would be interesting to check out. So let me know, are you a fan of Secret Invasion? Will you be watching it? Do you think that, the MCU can do sci-fi, or are you just totally turned off from superhero stuff and are not interested at all? Let me know what you think about Secret Invasion in the comments below. And then I want to talk about this movie trailer that looks insane. I don't know if I would call it sci-fi, but it is also comic book related, so it's kind of tied, I guess, to the Secret Invasion story. But that would be the trailer for the movie Kraven the Hunter. Now, Kraven the Hunter is a character from Spider-Man's kind of rogues gallery, kind of the enemies that he's faced in the past. But he's a very interesting character because he doesn't appear that much. He hasn't appeared in that many storylines, but he's known for one in particular called Kraven's Last Hunt, which again is a huge story from the comic books. And I don't think that it's going to be adapted completely to this movie, but they're definitely taking some story points from that and making it into the film. But the trailer itself just looks crazy. It shows it shows Aaron Taylor Johnson, biting people's noses off and doing all these kind of things. It looks like they're trying to make him kind of like Wolverine. His character in the comic books isn't that at all. He's he's more Burt Reynolds, I would say, than Hugh Jackman. But the character in the film does look very much kind of like Wolverine. Like he's very animalistic. He doesn't have metal claws or anything, but he's ripping people apart. In that vein, this will be the first R-rated Spider-Man film, so that's kind of crazy. I was surprised that the Venom films weren't R-rated, but I guess they were PG-13, so they landed right on the mark there. I'm not sure how this will connect to the Spider-Man universe. There's all these different, because you got the animated Spider-Man films, you got the MCU Spider-Man, and then you've got the Spider-Man films with the MCU Spider-Man that aren't really part of the MCU because Sony releases, it's just a big mess. So I don't know if this character is ever going to meet up with Tom Holland Spider-Man, or if they're ever going to meet Venom or Morbius. Probably not Morbius. This trailer does remind me a lot of the Morbius trailer, and that's not a great thing because Morbius was a horrible movie. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's basically Jared Leto turns into a vampire, and it's really kind of silly and it's not good. But this is the same studio that made Morbius. They made this film too. So I'm usually a fan of Aaron Taylor Johnson, so I'm going to give this a try. I mean, Russell Crowe is in it. He plays his father. And another actor, Alessandro Nivola, plays a character named the Rhino. That actor is actually very good. I'm a fan of his. He was Pollux Troy in Face Off, and he's been in a lot of other things too, but I'm a fan of his when he shows up and stuff. A character known as the Chameleon will also be appearing. That's another famous Spider-Man villain. But again, the fact that this is the same studio that created Morbius, and there are parts of the trailer that reminded me of the Morbius trailer, one in particular when he's like climbing on the walls, and there's a scene in Morbius where that character also climbed on the walls. So it's just giving me like PTSD from that movie, I guess. I have Morbius PTSD. But let me know. I'll leave a link to the trailer in the comments. Let me know, are you a fan of Spider-Man movies? Are you going to watch this movie? I just want to talk about it because the trailer just looks crazy. It almost looks satirical. I don't think it's supposed to be a funny movie. It's an R-rated movie, but it's so serious. It looks funny. I don't know. You should check it out. If you've got a couple minutes, you should check out the trailer. Definitely check it out with headphones on. It's a red band trailer. If you know what that means, there's blood and swearing and all kinds of stuff like that. So let me know. Do you think Kraven is going to be a good movie, or are you just going to watch it because it looks like a dumpster fire and it will be fun to talk about afterwards? Let me know about that in the comments below. And then another interesting story I found on Twitter, and that is that Mortal Kombat 2 has begun filming. This will be the sequel to the film that came out a couple years ago. I was actually a fan of that movie. I know that a lot of people weren't because they had a problem with the fact that it was a Mortal Kombat movie that did not show a Mortal Kombat tournament. Now, from my perspective, I thought that was really cool. I thought that it was a cool way to show like a Mortal Kombat style film, by not just having, the tournament to save the world like it always is in every Mortal Kombat thing that's ever been created. I thought that just like showing them fight basically one-on-one in all these different locales was really smart. A lot of people didn't agree with me. A lot of people were like, wait a minute, this is Mortal Kombat. There's no Mortal Kombat tournament. They don't even talk about it until the end. And then they basically talk about like that it's off or something, or that they're training for the next one. So what the heck happened to the tournament? But again, I didn't mind that. I thought that was kind of smart, but it does look like Mortal Kombat 2 will be about an actual fighting tournament. So we will get kind of the standard format for a Mortal Kombat film and game with this film. But the thing that I found most interesting is that the producer of the film, Todd Garner, shared a photo of the new and old cast the night before filming began, and it included Karl Urban. So there have been rumors that Karl Urban would star in this film as the character Johnny Cage, and it appears with this photo that now this is confirmed that Karl Urban will be appearing in this movie. I think that's a great idea. I'm a huge fan of Karl Urban. Of course, he played Bones in the Star Trek films, but he's been in 100 things. He's also known from Lord of the Rings and most recently from The Boys. So I think that that will be good. I don't know about him as Johnny Cage. I can think of like 5 other Mortal Kombat characters that I'd rather see him as, but I'm sure he'll do a great job as Johnny Cage. Most of the surviving original cast from Mortal Kombat, the first film, will be returning for this movie. So that new character, Cole Young, will be returning as well. Besides Johnny Cage, Jade, Katana, and Quan Chi will all be joining the roster or the cast, whatever you want to call it. So that's cool. Those are some of my favorite characters, Quan Chi in particular, and it will be cool to see those characters on screen. And like I said, I like the original Mortal Kombat. I thought it was a good film. I thought it was a lot of fun, and I really liked the backstory of Sub-Zero and Scorpion. I always thought that was really compelling from the games, and I thought they did a really good job of it in the movie. And I'm not sure if those characters are coming back. No, I do know Sub-Zero is coming back. I don't know that Scorpion is coming back, but Sub-Zero will be coming back. And I think that they're actually going to turn him into a new character. So if you're familiar with the games, the original Sub-Zero turns into a new character, and then a new Sub-Zero comes out. And I think that they're going to start that in this movie too, that the actor who played Sub-Zero in the first film will be playing Noob Saibot in this film, which is the evolution of that character. So again, another cool tie-in to the game. I will be watching this movie for sure. I'm a big fan. I've watched the original movie a bunch of times. I still listen to that original theme song all the time. I don't know. I love that Mortal Kombat theme. And I like what they do with these films. So let me know, what do you think about this news? Are you a fan of the first movie? Did you not like the choices like with the character designs or the fact that there wasn't a fighting tournament? Or did you think it was a fun movie, and are you psyched for this one? Let me know in the comments below. Another cool thing that I found on Twitter, it was reported that Ben Affleck was spotted on the set of Deadpool 3. I'm a fan of the Deadpool movies. Again, it's another comic book movie, but I really like both Deadpool movies. And in a lot of ways, they're very different, but also very the same, which is really interesting. But the reason that it's cool that Ben Affleck is on the set of Deadpool 3 is because that we've heard that Deadpool 3 is also going to be about the multiverse. I know the multiverse is everywhere right now. I mean, I just talked about the new Babylon 5 film, which is going to be about the multiverse. We just had the Spider-Man film about the multiverse, the Flash film about the multiverse, the Doctor Strange film about the multiverse. Everybody's about the multiverse, and this will be no different. So this will be about like a Deadpool multiverse. We'll see different versions of Deadpool. We'll see a female version of Deadpool. We'll see Hugh Jackman return as Wolverine, and we will see different versions of Wolverine. If you watch Deadpool 2, you may recall that at the end of the movie, Deadpool just goes to different universes and different timelines and starts doing stuff and killing people. And I think that this movie will just be a continuation of that and how Deadpool kind of breaks the multiverse. I think it could be interesting because, like I said, there is a lot of multiverse stuff. So having a parody about a multiverse film makes a lot of sense. And I think that Deadpool is the perfect way to do that. One interesting kind of subplot about this movie that has come out since the writer's strike is that because of the writer's strike, Ryan Reynolds, who plays Deadpool, can't improvise on set. And reportedly, that is a big part of what he does while filming Deadpool. And people are worried that with the writer's strike, now he can't do that. Is Deadpool 3 not going to be as funny as the first two? Well, I'm pretty sure they already figured a way to get around that, because if you remember, Deadpool wears a mask. So you can't really see his mouth when he talks or or does any of that stuff anyway for most of the scenes. I mean, I know there are scenes where he appears without a mask on, but for the most part, he has a mask on. So really, he could say whatever he wants during filming and come up with stuff later. And then in post-production, when the writer's strike is over, he can add all that stuff in post, and record over it. So I don't really think that that's going to affect Deadpool 3 at all. And I think they're going to be able to finish that film and it will be just as good as any of the other Deadpools, given that the writer's strike should be over within the next few months. I mean, if they have to release Deadpool 3 before the strike is over, then yeah, this movie's going to suck. But as long as they don't have to do that, I still think we're going to get the Ryan Reynolds version of Deadpool that we have come to love over all these years. But having Ben Affleck on the set means that we could see him appear as Daredevil. Now, we just saw Ben Affleck appear in another multiverse movie, The Flash, as Batman. I don't think he's going to appear as Batman in Deadpool 3 because Batman is DC, Deadpool is the MCU, or Marvel more specifically. But you may not remember that Ben Affleck did appear as Daredevil in not one but two movies. This was way before the MCU. This was kind of around the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man days. So seeing Ben Affleck again as Daredevil would be pretty funny. I hope it's for more than just like one scene where Ryan Reynolds shows up and shoots him in the face or something and then just walks on. I think it would be cool if Ben Affleck as Daredevil helped Deadpool a little bit. I mean, Daredevil and Deadpool have been paired together before in the comics. So it would be funny to see them together because they're very different characters. So obviously you get an odd couple right there. But we're already going to have Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. So that may be too many heroes for one movie. But I thought that was kind of cool that we could see Daredevil again, but played as Ben Affleck. I didn't really like his depiction as Daredevil. I think the guy who does it now does a way better job. But let me know, would you like to see Ben Affleck again in Deadpool, or do you not care at all? And then finally, I just want to kind of update you on how the writer's strike is going. SAG president Fran Drescher, yep, that Fran Drescher from The Nanny, has said that they have made major progress in the last week. So it looks like we could see a resolution to not only the SAG strike, but also the writer's strike in the next week, because it looks like they're trying to resolve this before the SAG strike happens. Now, if the writers and the actors go on strike, everything shuts down immediately. I mean, without writers and actors, nothing happens. Now, the Directors Guild of America did settle with Hollywood, so they're not in danger of going on strike anymore like they were when the writers first went on strike, but nothing has been resolved with the writers yet, but they do stand in solidarity with the actors. So if the Screen Actors Guild does make a deal with Hollywood, then the writers will fall in line and sign a deal as well, and everything will go back to normal. If not, on June 30th, everything stops, and basically we have radio silence in America until these strikes are settled. So June 30th is a very big day. And that day we'll know if we are in for a very long strike, because if they do decide to go on strike June 30th, it won't just be for a week. It's going to be for at least a couple of months, if not through the summer, which was the original projection when the writers first went on strike. So definitely be checking out online to see what happens. I will update you next week on my podcast, whatever happens. I'm crossing my fingers that The Nanny is able to get the deal done and that we will not have a strike and that things will stop getting canceled, because we're only going to get more and more bad news. They can't even really greenlight anything while the actors and the writers are both on strike. So everything will come to a halt June 30th if nothing is solved. So let me know what you think about this. Do the actors and writers need to sign on the dotted line and get back to work because we don't want things to keep getting canceled? Or do you stand with them and think that they should be on strike for as long as they need to be to get what they think they deserve? Let me know in the comments below. I think you know what my feelings are. I think that the writers and the actors do deserve more than they're getting. And I'm not talking about the major writers and the major actors that make millions and millions of dollars. Of course, we're talking about the day players that are just looking for cost of living, basically. And if you know anything about California, you know it's very hard to live in California. So unless they're going to move the production of every series out of California, I think they need to act accordingly and pay their writers and actors more. But let me know what you think of the strike and all of its components in the comments below. Well, that's all I have this time. Thank you very much for joining me. Again, the best way to support me is to not only hit the like button, but to also be subscribed so you can see when my future videos come out. Let me know in the comments below if you have any feelings about anything that I spoke about today, and I will see you next time on What Did I Miss?